Let's get into our briefings. Sorry, Oliver, you done all that? You're on it. Thank you. Giles and Stuart, welcome up. I know we've got the quarterly insights report to go through, so happy to hand over to you and take it away.
Kia ora koutou, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So this is just a short briefing to present to you an annual sort of stats roll-up from NZTA on public transport. You should have a copy of this, hopefully. Yes, good. So a bit of a roll-up on public transport usage across the motu for the year. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, here it is. The high sort of summarisation from a Canterbury Regional Council perspective in terms of context. If you're looking at the first cover page with a bunch of octagons on it and numbers, to give you some context, total service kilometres operated 133 million. We represent 12% of that. Vehicles, bus and trains, 3,000 across the motu. Our vehicles represent, again, about 10% of that. 495 zero-emission buses in Aotearoa. We represent 14% of that, with 70 vehicles in our fleet. 3 million total mobility trips. We account for 18% of that, with 500,000 trips. What else can I tell you? Yeah, so that's really the key context for page 1. If we flick to page 3, which is this section, public transport boardings by region, a bunch of pie charts there. I'm particularly interested in the top right-hand pie chart. They're not slides. It's a printout. Yeah. Shall I just wait till everyone's got a copy? Okay, so on page 3, top right-hand pie chart titled Public Transport Boardings by Passenger Type. This is an interesting one. So this is the splits across the country by sort of concession type, and putting it in context for a Canterbury Regional Council. So our adult patronage is 33% versus the average across the country of 42.7. Our child and youth represents 28% of our patronage, so significantly higher than the average for the country. Our under 25s is 17% versus 5.7 across the country. Our community services cards represent 9% of our patronage and 5.8% across the country, and Super Gold 11%. So why I highlighted that, it's important to remember or understand that sort of split when we talk about average fares for Canterbury compared to the rest of the country. So we have less full-paying adults operating on a network than on average around the country, and more concession users across our network than on average across the country. And in particular, the youth under 25 concession and the child concession is significantly higher percentage of our patronage.
Vicky's got a question just now.
Yeah,
Slightly
sure,
bigger, Vicky.
sure.
Two questions. One is on that original transport boardings, like month by month and comparing the years. Are those drops? Do they just coincide with when the holidays occur? Is that what takes those nosedives?
That's right. So December, January, of course, is school holidays, and essentially people take their annual leave to coincide with their kids' holidays. Christmas, New Year breaks in there as well. Yep.
Okay. And because we've got so many youth and school people, that's why we get those real sharp drops. Okay. And then in terms of the, I guess, what's the takeaway from the fact that we have the high proportion of concessions, particularly young under 25 and so on? Like in my head, I'm thinking, well, that's great because that's future full adult paying passengers, but also suggests that we've maybe got more work to do to attract the adults, full paying adults on as well. But how do you frame that? Or what do you see out of that data?
Sure. So through Chair, if we just focus for a moment on the under 25 segment in that pie chart top right, that's representing the number of people who enjoy a concession for under 25 across Aotearoa. And so not many councils offer that concession anymore. It was part of the government sort of recovery process post-COVID, and then it got removed, but we retained our under 25 concession. So ordinarily across most other regions, the under 25s are counted as adults, so they'll be paying an adult fare. Whereas in our case, we're still operating that concession, so that will be a significant difference. And because these are percentages, that obviously skews some of the other percentages. I do find it interesting that our community services card is higher, almost to the point of double the average. Our child is very high. So we have a lot of school services that we operate in the city to take the pressure off the primary network, and that may not well be the case in other regions.
I'm just conscious that we've got quite a lot to get through in only half an hour, so maybe hold your question, and we'll get through it and then ask questions at the end. So keep going, Stuart.
Sure. Looking at this slide, which talks about public transport boardings by region, and you can see the sort of boarding trends across multiple years there across all the regions. In general, they're tracking pretty much similarly. One thing I would highlight is Horizons in the centre of the middle column. Horizons recently, when I say recently, late last year, went to market and retendered their contracts. And at that time, they took that opportunity to introduce some new routes, and their fleet is now 100% electric. So we can see some benefits coming out of there, given extra coverage and service delivery in their region, and of course the 100% EV fleet would be attracting more users there. So their trend is slightly different, continuing to sort of track upwards, whereas most other regions are reaching a plateau at the moment. On the next page, public transport average fares. I mentioned this a wee bit earlier when I was talking through the distribution of demographic of patronage across our network. And as council is aware, our average fare is quite low compared to the rest of the country at 85 cents. And that's driven by a number of things. The main driver, of course, is our flat fare trial at the moment. And we've recently put the fares up, as you know, in July. So we would expect to see our average fare increase for the current fiscal year. We've been operating concessions for a period of time, in particular the under 25 concession, which other councils don't operate. And also the split of concession riders on our network seems to be higher than the average across the country. So that will be contributing to a slightly lower average fare as well. What am I going to talk about next? I might go to the numbers table, public transport boardings and fare revenue. So this gives you a sense of scale across the country. Obviously, Canterbury Region Council is the third largest provider of public transport, and you can see there that our patronage for our region is slightly lower than the rest of the country, excluding Auckland and Wellington. So all the small regions combined come to pretty close to what we provide in terms of patronage outcomes across the network. You'll see there that our fare revenue for the last fiscal year, 24-25, was $13 million. And in our budget for this fiscal year, we've budgeted $20 million because of the fare changes that we've implemented recently. And also the increased patronage we've been carrying. So those two factors, we expect to see a significant uplift in our fare revenue, and that will translate to a higher average fare as well. We are anticipating that to be around the $1.20 mark for this fiscal year, so a significant improvement there. The last area I'm keen to focus on is the service performance measures. I'll just go to the little wheels here, which look at three different measures. They look at reliability of the service. Did the trip start on time? It looks at cancellations, and in this report, cancellations also refers to trips that didn't run, I missed trips, and that's the red segment, and then the inner circle, the sort of yellowy orange segment there, measures punctuality. Did the service start and finish on time? One of the things that we've identified in looking at this report is a discrepancy in the numbers that are given to NZTA and the numbers that we report in our annual reports for council. And you'll possibly notice that in the blue outer circle it says 94% reliability, whereas we're reporting 95% reliability. The reason behind that we've identified is that we are providing NZTA data extracts from our RTI system, but of course that doesn't necessarily account for all activities that are going on our network. And what I mean by that is, with using technology, there's invariably trips that don't track on occasion on our network. So they do run when we know they run because we monitor that they run, but they're not reported in the technical data that's provided to NZTA. So that's why there's that 1% difference. So when we report information to you, we're looking at the technical data from our RTI system, but also the human aspect of understanding how our network functions. Another good representation of that manifesting itself in these reports is in the next page, drilling down by service type. If we look at the bottom right-hand segment, talking about ferries, you can see that this report suggests that 15% of our ferries didn't run. Well, I can tell you that that's not correct. If 15% of our ferries didn't run, we would be hearing quite a lot from our community about that, and we know that that number is not correct. The reason behind that number, again, is because we've had tracking issues with our RTI system for the ferry, and we also know of a number of human error issues in terms of reporting operations of that vessel. Notwithstanding that, the ferry trips that have been impacted are higher than our bus network, and that's driven by weather events impacting on the ferry operating. And also when we look at the punctuality and reliability of the ferry, while it is better than those numbers shown on this chart, it is still not as high as our bus operations. In terms of reliability, it's at 92%, and that's the number we've reported to council. And the reason that's lower is for several things. Weather events causing the ferry to be late or not run. Movements in the harbour which delay our vessel from operating on time. So there might be berthing a cruise ship or berthing a freight vessel inside the inner harbour, and so we must give way to that traffic. And the third issue is a problem of, what's the best way to describe it? A problem of positive engagement with our service. So we have introduced a larger vessel on that service to address overcrowding that we have, particularly in summer, and fine weekends when people are attending the Littleton Market or popping over to Diamond Harbour to enjoy the sunshine. Because we have a larger vessel now, it takes longer to board and disembark passengers, and therefore the ferry can't meet its timetable on those busy days. So again, that's a good example where the ferry actually ran, but it didn't run to time. What's interesting about that is we're not seeing negative feedback from our community because the ferry didn't run on time. People are enjoying the fact that they can actually get on the ferry to take the trip. And as the day goes by, the ferry makes up time and rejoins its normal timetable functions once the peaks have been changed. We have looked at opportunities to change the timetable so that the ferry can run on time. However, what we know from how our community uses that service is they're more interested in being able to get on the ferry and take the ferry trip than they are in waiting for a ferry to disembark because we've delayed the timetable. So we don't think changing the timetable is going to provide a good community outcome. And so 92%, while it's not a number that we are particularly happy with, it reflects the operational parameters of that vessel in the inner harbour. Council might be aware a couple of years ago we had some conversations about moving the berthing location of the ferry further into the inner harbour, and that was driven by the Littleton Port Company needing to reshape and reuse how the inner harbour is allocated. If we were to do that, we had conversations with council about the potential to need a second ferry, and we had actually budgeted to procure a second ferry. That's since been taken out of our long-term plan while we await that change to happen. So there is future thinking around how to maintain a level of service for those communities, but at the present time, the demand doesn't align with the need to change our timetable. I'm going to stop talking there and be open to questions.
Cool. Thanks, Stuart. Thank you so much. Grant, you had a question earlier on, and I'll take others.
Thanks, Stuart. Just a couple of questions. Can you run through on page 3 that pie chart in terms of each one of those as they relate to Environment Canterbury? You mentioned 33% for adults, 28% for children. I lost what you said for under 25s.
Under 25, 17%.
Sorry, concessions?
Community Services Card, 9%. Super Gold, 11%. We don't have another category.
Sorry, the other query, page 11. The bottom chart down there talks about punctuality trips, 68.5%. Is that correct? Or is, I'm thinking of what one of our outcomes is to deliver punctuality at around about 95%. Are we way behind?
Yeah, so again, punctuality number here is not accurately reflecting what happens on our network for the reasons I explained before, that we have been providing NZTA with straight data out of our RTI system as opposed to normalising that data with the reality of what does happen on our network. So our punctuality is higher than 68%, it's around about the 78% mark. Having said that, 78% is still quite low. And the key factors that influence the punctuality of our service, and just reminding you what that means, that the trip starts and finishes on time. So there's several factors that influence that. And I'll go through them in order of sort of impact. Traffic on our roading network influences the timing of our service. More traffic, more delays. The timetable on our network assumes, based on historical travel times, what the journey time of a bus might be. And that doesn't take into account any current disruptions on the roading network from roadworks, accidents, etc. One of the other key contributors to punctuality for us in the last 2 years is the significant increase in patronage. Because every time a bus stops and boards or alights passengers, the more passengers that board or alight, the more time the bus is stopped, and therefore it gets later and later. So while having extra patronage is great, the timetables that we currently operate have not been codified based on that level of patronage. So you might ask the question, well, why don't we adjust our timetables to accommodate that? That basically means that the trip time will take longer, and in order to accommodate longer trip times, we need more buses. So it becomes a circular argument of successfully delivering more patronage, but not having funding to respond to the implications of that.
Following up, so does that mean in terms of the outcomes that we've kind of indicated in the long-term plan, that it would be better for us to have a look at a range rather than a definite figure? But and I know I've raised that issue before, that the 95% target is something that we kind of seem to fail on all the time. You think, well, is that unreasonable? What you're suggesting is that it probably is, given factors outside our control. Would that be a fair assumption?
So currently in the long-term plan, the target is for reliability, which is the trip starts on time, and we are achieving that target. So we don't have a target in our long-term plan for punctuality. I guess I would say that it's good to have a challenging and aspirational target because that's what we aspire to for our community. The fact that we are struggling to achieve that target through a number of issues that are outside our control, i.e. funding is a key one. That's just part of the story in my view. Council have been quite supportive of PT in the long-term plan and anticipated and included funding for service uplifts that would help with these issues. Unfortunately, the funding partner through Central Government and NZTA didn't come to the party, and so we were unable to deliver those improvements that we had planned to do. And in my view, that's just part of the story that we need to tell. In terms of patronage impacting, we have worked very hard with council support to grow patronage across Greater Christchurch and have seen a really good response from our community there. So that's a good problem to have. And again, I don't think it would be reasonable to shy away from the realities of that increase in demand for our service. What that says to us is, well, we now need to start thinking about capacity, which you're aware of, and adjusting our timetables, which does require investment.
Dion?
Thank you. I just want to pick up on the question that Grant was asking. One, do you think there potentially could be a shared target around this punctuality with the Christchurch City Council as a leader into the next question that I have is the gerrymandering of the road end network. You've got no, it is gerrymandering all over the place, speed bumps and all of these other things. We know, well, I know, been told by people, you guys, that they have a small but material impact on the how long it takes, but you cross that over the entire network from one end of the city to the other end of the city, that could be 2 or 3 minutes, which affects that. So is that still having an impact, and how much of an impact is that roading changes that are happening right across the city having on that, and do we need a bigger look at that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the first thing I'd say is there is and will always be roadworks on our network. And historically, what we do when we calculate our timetables is we look at the actual run times of our routes in the past. And that takes account of delays due to roadworks at that point in time. However, as we know that if we look to the future, the scheduling and timing of repairs and maintenance and improvements to the roading network don't always match what's happened in the past in terms of time of disruption and location of disruption. So we can only look back to look forward in that respect. And I think we have to accept the fact that in order for us to run on a roading corridor, it requires maintenance and improvements. Having said that, of course, there has been an increased focus on safety over the last several years. And so some of the safety improvements have had a negative impact on reliability of our service. And again, elected members either at Christchurch City Council or here are weighing up priorities there. I would say that having joint objectives or goals is a good idea because we both parties contribute to the reliability of the service. And so, yeah, I think that would be a good move forward.
Yeah, I think let's explore that somehow, even just on that reliability, punctuality part, because especially community boards need to understand that, I think. I did have another question, but I can't remember what it is because that sparked me. The is it RTI? RTI. Can we get an update? Maybe not now, but why is that different? Why is there that difference? Or you explain why there is that difference. But what are we going to do about changing that? Because if we're getting different data sets, reported in different places, I don't accept that, and I think we need to fix that somehow. So maybe not right now, but come back to us at some stage. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Dion. I think when you look at that the punctuality number, it is like you said, Stuart, it's a bit of a sign of congestion and things. So it's actually not a bad thing that it's there. I mean, it's not great. It'd be great if it was higher, but it's also reflecting that that's why we need public transport in Christchurch. And I think any of us that come into town or leave town at those peak times understands that. And this is not a question, but, the $78 million that we've talked about that wasn't invested in Christchurch probably would have helped, but you don't have to answer that. That's not a question, it's just a statement from me. And Vicky, Ian, you got a question, then we'll go to Vicky, and then that's it, because we're over time.
Thanks, Craig. When I look at the chart on public transport boardings and fare revenue by region, I don't know what page that is, and if I was the NZTA, I'd say Christchurch is a cop case compared to the other two major transport providers. So there are two questions that come from that, really. One is that causing us problems with NZTA, the fact that our fare recovery is so low compared to the other two major regions? And I know we've got geographical reasons. And the second is, does it also mean that the subsidy from the actual Christchurch ratepayers is the highest in the country compared to other regions in terms of subsidising individual transport, or are the dollar numbers not out of line in terms of the subsidy from the ratepayers to the public transport?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, a few questions in there. In terms of NZTA, I'm sure NZTA are concerned about our numbers. I think that's a reasonable thing to say, and they've expressed that to us as we went through the private revenue ratio target process that you'll be aware of How that might manifest itself for Canterbury Regional Council in the future. So the current 3-year funding allocation has been set. However, the next funding cycle may well have an influence placed upon it around contribution from private revenue sources, i.e. fares and other things. So that may be an issue for us. Having said that, as I mentioned earlier, Council have approved and we've implemented a fare change in July. And so we will be able to demonstrate active improvements in those things. To go from our current state up to Wellington or Auckland's numbers in that short period of time would kill our network, because it would be such a huge shift in fare price that our community just wouldn't see value in paying it. So I would think that would be quite dangerous.
If I can just, a couple of quick follow-ups. So our numbers, in terms of having some of the lowest per kilometre fare recovery, how much is that skewed by North Canterbury, across the Waimak and out of the Selwyn district in terms of those average numbers? And you still haven't answered the question about the ratepayers' contribution yet.
Yeah, so coming to the ratepayer contribution, so our subsidy level is much higher than Auckland and Wellington, absolutely. It's not the highest in the country, but it's among the highest in the country at the moment. In terms of your last question, how much does Waimakariri and Selwyn skew our numbers? Very, very little. They represent about 5% of our patronage, so it's not a large contributor. In fact, you could argue that they contributed better to our outcome because a significant proportion of their patronage is commuter travel in the mornings and evenings.
Thanks, Stuart. Last question, Vicky.
Yeah, I guess a point is that Christchurch's congestion has got really bad and is recognising some of the worst in the country. So we do have to make sure we keep our public transport operating well and attractive, which is what we've been doing. I'm interested in the Super Gold Card part because our average fare is less than the lowest concession fare. So the average fare, it says, is 0.85, but our concession when pre-July was $1 was the cheapest. So I'm presuming that must be the Super Gold Card that's pulling it down, where you've got the zero step-on fare. Or am I missing something here? Because maybe it's the trip number. But how does the Super Gold Card part get accounted for? And then do we get, because I've just done a quick calc and 15 million and 11%, we should be getting around about 5 million from the government for the Super Gold Card. So do we?
Okay, going backwards. In terms of Super Gold Card funding, it is bulk funded. There's a fixed bucket of money which is allocated across the country, and it is not based anymore on consumption. So that changed maybe 5 years ago, where it used to be based. We used to get funded based on ridership, and that is no longer the case. The philosophy from NZTA is that they're already paying for that seat through their provision of the service, and so they don't need to fund by ridership. So we're not getting the funding we used to get for Super Gold. Why is it only 85 cents when...
So what do we get then?
It's circa $3.2 million, give or take a couple $100,000.
Keep going, Stuart.
So in terms of the 85 cents, the 85 cents takes account of transfers, which are free trips, capping, which is free trips, Super Gold, which are free trips. The ratio between obviously child and adult, and that all distills down to a lower average fare than our minimum fare. Yeah. So around about just under a third of all of our trips are free trips because they're transfers or capping.
Thanks, Stuart. Just like going back to some of Ian's points, I mean, it's the numbers are what they are in terms of these tables, but I think it's we're not comparing apples with apples when we compare Auckland and Wellington with us. Obviously, we know they've got a whole lot more infrastructure, a whole lot more routes, and all those sorts of things. So that's something that obviously we've been striving to do. Uplift in Route 7 this year has been good. That'll hopefully contribute to more private share going forward. If we get uplift in Routes 1 and 5, that should do the same because they're good services. They're well patronised. And obviously they didn't have earthquakes and stuff. So, we're also rebuilding our network from that time still to today. And I think the more we can invest, and I've mentioned the previous infrastructure funding that didn't come to Christchurch in the end, I think that's all part of it. And so I think we need to think about that. Yes, we have purposely lowered our fares previously to get that uplift, and that seems to have worked. And now we're looking at those fares, and we've raised them again. So I think it'll be exciting to look forward, but we also know that we only get 5% of the national funding, and I'm going to keep saying this until I can't say it anymore, where we should be getting maybe 13-14% of the national funding. So if that funding was invested in more services, more infrastructure in Christchurch, I believe our numbers would be better and our private share would be better as well. But that's to be seen. So thank you. Thanks, team. And we'll move on to our next presentation. Thank you. Next up, we've got I've got a couple of briefings on this over the next hour and a half, roughly. And I know for the first one, we've got Amy and Emma coming to the table, and this is on the work we've been doing with council, but also with our communities and partners and stakeholders around the biodiversity strategy. So happy to hand over to you, Amy, and we'll go for it. Thank you. I know Emma's handing out some other sheets. So. Cool.
Bit of sizzle. Yeah, we'll bring sizzle. We can bring the sizzle.
Go for it, Amy.
Kia ora tātou. So as you've said, Chair, the next two papers, excuse me, relate to biodiversity. Just reminding you that the first strategy, not to state the obvious, is looking forward, obviously, to the revitalisation of the current biodiversity strategy. And then Tim's team will be taking you through an online reporting, which is retrospective, obviously, but both ends of the system. So this is where we're going, and then we will see the impacts and track the new approach that we're proposing. So also just wanted to thank you all for your patience. This work has had significant amount of feedback and back and forth, I think, from the Strategy and Policy Committee. So we're grateful for that, and that we have prioritised this work and refocused some resource to ensure that we can actually address the points raised. So with that, I'll hand you over to Emma and to Alex. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, councillors. So Alex is online to support this, but I will take you through the presentation, and we are really, as Amy said, bringing this back to you following the briefing that we had with councillors last month on the 14th of August. And since then, we've been working closely with the chair and with councillors Edge and Robinson and Southworth to address the feedback and incorporate that into the revitalisation of the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy. The intention is that we will finalise this to a draft, and the proposal is that we bring this to your final council meeting this month on the 17th of September to consider for approval. The couple of points I just would like to really sort of emphasise here is the collaborative nature of this development process. So this, the decision was to do a refresh of the existing strategy which was adopted by council and operationalised by staff in 2018. And this really was to recognise that the existing strategy in many respects is still very fit for purpose, but there was the opportunity to really do a refresh to it rather than sort of start from scratch and retain. So it's not something entirely new, but building on the existing strategy. It's been a very collaborative process. We've had 3 times as many contributors in refreshing and the collaborative through the workshops than were involved in the development of the first strategy 17 years ago. So really good participation, and that's really through that process has really kind of reinvigorated the energy. Always the challenge with such diverse interests is landing in a place that people can see themselves in the strategy. And, with that diversity comes all different sort of contributions. And so the position we've got to is a document that really we look to achieve that people can see themselves in it. And the other main point is that with the release of the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, ensuring that the new strategy met all the requirements as required under that MPS. So, as I said, we briefed the councillors last month, and I won't go over this. This is just a reminder of the process to date, which you saw at last month's briefing. As I said, since then, we've continued to update the strategy with feedback, and we shared that. That's now been shared with all of the contributors, as well as the Mana Whenua Advisory Group. We've been meeting weekly with the chair and those councillors, and worked on the preliminary design. So what I've just passed around so that it's a bit more readable than what's in the presentation is a version of the strategy on a page, which outlines the vision, the goals, the actions, and the indicators. So that's for you to have a look at. This is a summary of the feedback that we heard from councillors that we've incorporated now into the document. I won't go through all of how we've addressed that. You've also been provided with a copy of the latest version, but I'll just pick up on a couple of key points. 2 things particularly around implementation and funding. So that was a discussion that we had with yourselves last month. And that is sort of outlined in the updated strategy, but the intent is that really in terms of funding and looking at how we fund this across all of the groups involved, that will be part of the ongoing implementation. We haven't gone into detail in the strategy itself around funding. So that is something that we recognise needs more work and that we will need to have a look at. The other issue is around considering where we provide a lot more analysis and look at the approach at a sort of a catchment and district or ecological district level. That is the other area that we've been giving a lot of consideration to, and is something that I want to signal that will need some further work. But on the whole, those other, which are sort of a flavour, they're not all of the feedback, but they sort of captured the key elements of the feedback that we heard from you at the last briefing. Those have now been incorporated into the document. So, that sort of summarises what I've talked to and how you can see the feedback's been incorporated, particularly acknowledging that the strategy is intended to sit alongside a whole lot of sort of other supplementary information, and that will serve the purpose of it really being a living document. And that way we can get the other contributors to add, sort of sign up to it, add in their actions, and recognising that this is something that we need to keep alive. So that's the intent between the strategy and sort of ongoing implementation of it. And I can take any questions on that, but I won't go through that. In particular, the next couple of slides, you'll see they just highlight the vision, the final vision, finalised vision there. And again, this was developed through the series of workshops. And these are the 5 goals. And the one that we particularly addressed following last month's briefing was goal 3. That was the one that was particularly acknowledged by our youth representative as important to youth and needing to be more active, so that, and to sort of distinguish from goal 5. So that's the change that's been made, and those are the 5 goals that underpin the strategy. This document is just an illustration, and you've got the updated one to refer to. That, oh no, it's the same document, exactly the same content, but appreciate that that's not an easy slide to read, but that really summarises the overall concept of the strategy, and will sit at the forefront, and it can also sit as a standalone document. This slide highlights the implementation plan, and as I said, this will address how we'll deliver the actions and look at how those will be funded on an ongoing basis through Council's long-term plans and annual plans, and will really require that coordinated approach across regional councils with mana whenua, TAs, our organisations, and that broad group of stakeholders. So from here, we're continuing to do refinements to the strategy over the next week, as well as finalising design. We've shared a sort of first look of the design with the councillors that we're working more closely with. That's looking really good. And the final draft of following today's feedback and direction, the intent is to bring that strategy to the council meeting on the 17th of September, and then those following steps will be post-adoption. So I think I will leave it there. There's a lot of information, but this is really to recap on the last time, and yeah, over to you, Chair.
Thanks, Emma. Questions from councillors or comments yet, Genevieve?
No, thanks so much for this. It's been really good to be involved at this level, and I applaud your work. With regards to on a page we talk about land, private land, and initiatives on land and sort of fresh water, but we still haven't discussed the concept of coastal on this sheet. In the actual document, it sort of goes into bits and pieces about coastal environment, but when we talk about initiatives and reporting on biodiversity work, a lot of that happens in the marine space, like with regards to seagrass planting, kelp recovery and the likes. And I think it would be really nice to see on this page, at least alluding to the point that some of the work doesn't just happen on the land, it's the initiatives of mana whenua too, and what they're doing in their takiwa, like, you know, in the water space, and how that could be part of sort of some sort of climate resilience work as well. And I think this is the chance to put that on paper. So
Thanks, Genevieve.
it wasn't really a question, sorry, but
All good. It's good
can it be
feedback.
added then?
Peter?
Yeah, not a question either, but an observation, and I think this needs to get out the door actually. So I'll support this. Whatever form you end up with, it just needs to go. It's something that we can put a tick beside. But my concern, I have some concerns here, and my concern has always been about terrestrial biodiversity and how good we are at doing that across TAs. And I know from my local TAs that you never hear them talking about it. You know, council meetings, they don't talk about it. They talk about parking and dogs and bloody buildings and all sorts of things. But they don't talk about this. Now, our responsibility here, in my understanding of this, is to implement the strategy for biodiversity across the region but we're not going to be 100% responsible for ensuring that everything that needs to be done by TAs is done. And I find that really a difficult thing, I guess, to put in a strategy, actually to point a finger at someone and say, hey, this is your responsibility to do this, but it is their responsibility to do that. And I've had myself in trouble in this council talking about that before. And we'll if we can just leave that behind. But the chair made a really good point this morning in councillor only time, that when he went to the mayoral forum, all the papers were presented by staff from here. And I think that we get left holding the baby sometimes on this, and I don't think it's fair on us. I'll take your point about coastal biodiversity and freshwater biodiversity in terms of habitat protection, those things that we're responsible for. But too many times we get involved in what are TA responsibilities. And I know they've got staff and champions and all sorts of things going on there, but I think in a strategy we need to be a bit more overt at pointing out, hey, you need to take some responsibility here. And whether they do or don't, then that's fine. So, again, I'll just reiterate, I think it needs to go, but I think I have some concerns about how that gets picked up. And we've had some really good champions in this room, you know, since I've been at council, people wanting to do the step change and the rest of it. So this gets us there, but yeah. It's about getting stuff done.
Thanks, Peter. And look, I actually do pick up that too, especially in the introduction and stuff and the roles and responsibilities, because I actually think that's already spelled out pretty clear in the MPS IB in terms of what roles we have. And there was also draft wording in our regional policy statement, which obviously isn't a live thing, but the draft wording might be useful in there as well, because yeah, you're right. It's a shared responsibility, not just with regional councils, district councils, but also with DOC and many others. So I think that needs to be spelt out a little bit more clearly, especially the role of our territorial authorities, because they do have strategies of their own. They are responsible under the MPSIB and the Resource Management Act for certain things, and that should be spelt out. And really emphasising that it is a shared responsibility in the first instance between us and them under the MPSIB. And the other thing that I've picked up in here is it says in here at the moment that it's a non-statutory document. I disagree, and I've said this numerous times. And even in the diagram there on page 5, because it is directed to us, and it says it in the top of 1.2 there, that we are required to prepare and implement a regional biodiversity strategy under the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, which, in my understanding, comes from the RMA, which is a statute. So I would say that it is actually a statutory document now. The previous one was not a statutory document. It was a voluntary, non-statutory document where we got people to sign up to it. This one's slightly different. We're required to do it under the MPSIB, under the RMA. So I believe it's a statutory document, in fact. So I think we just need to either, and I might not be right on that, I'm just putting my opinion across. Yeah, and I think that we need to clarify that with our staff and lawyers or whatever, just to be clear. And if it's a bit of both, then let's say it's a little bit of both, because that's okay as well. But I just think we should be clear. I don't think it's completely clear yet in here, that is important because it comes back to what Peter said about roles and responsibilities and who is meant to do what. And I know you've got your hand up there, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm interjecting helpfully or not, but I think the distinction is that it's part of a statutory hierarchy in that it's now a document that's got to be prepared under the MPS, but it doesn't have a lot of statutory impact. So there's no consequences or penalties or the other sort of components of a regulatory approach that we might see. So maybe we just need to make that distinction clearer.
Yep, for sure. But I also don't think it's true to call it a non-statutory document either, because I think that's a bit misleading. So let's just get the right words about that. Yeah. Yep, Genevieve.
Yeah, along those lines, actually, I agree with you. I think it is a quasi-judicial, statutory document. I think maybe within this particular document, we could actually have some sort of reporting system of maybe to have a focus on them reporting, signatories reporting to us with some of their work. Would be quite nice to see, regularly. God, my language today is just all over the place. Yeah, so I think that not a level of service or something like that, but similar to the effect that as a signatory, there's a responsibility of showing at least something in action.
And just to pick up on that, like I said, the previous one did have signatories because it was non-statutory. This one doesn't require signatories because it's directed for us to prepare it under the NPSIB. But what we're considering doing is getting signatories to it, and therefore you could do what you're saying, Genevieve. We could ask people to volunteer what actions, and I know that's a process that we're still in the middle of, to volunteer actions, potentially budgets as well. But I do think we should amplify the role that the district councils do play. The fact that we have the biodiversity champions group under the Mayoral Forum is also important, and it is a key thing in the Mayoral Forum's plan for Canterbury. So I just think we should link it to that a little bit more as well. But I got Ian next, and then Claire next, sorry, and then Ian.
I think Amy.
And Amy, yeah.
Chair, if I may, absolutely. I think it would be quite simple to strengthen the partnership element and make absolutely that more explicit. To the point on whether it's legislative or statutory, very simple to say as required. Point to all the pieces of legislation, because as you've rightly noted, there's a bunch of them. And not just directing us, but also directing our partners. So we can make that absolutely explicit.
Cool. Claire, and then Ian.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Look, thanks to the staff that have been involved in getting this to where it is. I mean, I've read it all quite critically, I guess. The responsibilities there certainly landed at our door, and I'm just wondering how much the cost of taking up those responsibilities is going to impact what the funding actually looks like. Personally, I agree with all the goals. I have no problem with them at all. But I can't see myself in it. I can't see the people that I represent in it, the landowners out in the provinces. There's a very strong Ngaitahu part about kaitiangatanga and all that stuff. But landowners actually have exactly the same feelings. It's just not expressed in that word. And I don't see that sentiment coming through anywhere in here. I don't see the other side of the partnership. So I think that we are missing a trick there. The biodiversity thing, it may not be read, of course, by those landowners. It may be just something that sits on a shelf and is used by people that have got an interest in ecology and stuff like that. So I quite like the way it's written, but I think that we're missing some stuff. The strategy on a page, while that idea is very good, you put that in a document, it ain't going to be able to be read either. So I'm just wondering, is the document going to be this size? I don't think it probably will be, but I think you just need to think about how you represent the strategy on a page.
2 pages.
And I'm probably staff of other councillors may have put that up. I'm going to just fall back on the thing that I hark on about every time that we get strategies and things written here. There wasn't too many issues in here, but some places we use Waitaha Canterbury. Several times we've used that, but the majority of times we've used Waitaha. I think that if we're going to be consistent, we've used other double banger English Māori. Please be consistent there. So,
thanks, Claire. Look, and I think that it is important to acknowledge the role of private landowners for sure. They definitely have a massive role to play and are playing a massive role alongside community and catchment groups, etc. So yeah, if we can find a way to amplify that, I think that is really important. So we all know that that's a massive part of being successful in this work is having landowners on board.
I
So,
had one other, if I may.
yeah,
On the strategy on the page, under your goal 2, you talk about including pests and impacts of climate change. I was quite disappointed to see that we had the pest control or the action around pests not as being a strategic action, actually just an action, and it's the last one in the thing. Whereas I think we've had a lot of discussions here at the council table about the importance of protecting our biodiversity from all sorts of pests, be it terrestrial, whether it be insects or birds or whatever. So I would have liked to have seen the 2.5 actually elevated. I think that we've probably got that around the wrong way.
cool. Thank you. Ian.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is, first question is, do we need approval from the district, from the TAs for this biodiversity strategy? And have we got universal approval from the TAs?
We haven't taken the step to seek approval from the TAs. That's not the process that we're intending. So we're looking to bring it to this council for adoption and then work with our other TAs and contributors in terms of how they sign up to it. So, yeah, we're not looking for sort of formal approval by all the contributors. So that will be an individual decision for them to the extent that they want to make a commitment to it and how they do that.
And if they don't make a commitment to it?
That decision is with them.
And the second question is, when you talk about Western science, do we exclude Northern, Eastern and Southern science, or are we? What are we trying to say there? I thought science was sort of science, and I wasn't sure that it was reflected in depending on what part of the globe it came from, or even who invented it, really, or who developed the science or the knowledge.
We can take that point on and think about how that language comes across. And yeah. Thank you.
Ian, I get your point around the TA approval. Otherwise, is important. I mean, like I said, I think under the MPSIB, I don't think we're required to get their approval. It is for us to approve the strategy, but of course, we want them to be on board. If they're not, it's not as useful, is it? So that's something that the team is really aware of. We know that we've worked hard to try to get it done within this this council term. It's been something that's been on the books for the whole time I've been here. So that process will continue post the 17th of September to try to get their commitment to it in some shape or form. And how that process rolls out after September will be important if it is adopted by us on the 17th. So I think that's really important. We've definitely thought about that, but I don't think we should be held back by that either because it is our document to approve. But yeah, very important that we get them, but not just them. Like I said, the other contributors that have been feeding into the process, the community groups, the catchment groups, forest and bird, fish and game, all of that lot, DOC, of course. They'll all be important in terms of how they can contribute and sign up to what we're trying to do here. But that I don't think that's required by the MPSIB. Vicky.
Yeah, thank you. So great to hear the contributions from everyone in the room. I had a couple of questions. So one around the performance indicators, which when I've looked at them a second time around, read more like they're an action rather than what I would normally consider to be a performance indicator. And in some of those, I think it's the way it's written, and others, they are an action that's leading to a potential performance indicator, I think. Could you just explain if I'm misunderstanding what a performance indicator should look like, or if there is like a further step in terms of creating what I mean, like a dashboard of progress really is, I guess, what I'm thinking of more as a performance indicator.
Thank you, Councillor Southworth. So the indicators have really been designed to ensure they link back to the actions. So they're sort of the outcome if the action is achieved. So they are, indicators in that regard, as opposed to a traditional biodiversity monitoring indicator, which is further work that we would do. So they're really intended to determine and, link back to the outcomes, to the actions that they're being achieved. So the actions are sort of worded and described as what we'll do, and then the performance indicators are what it would look like when those have been achieved.
Sometimes also in these types of strategies, particularly when you've got a lot of players, sometimes the performance indicators dip into activity, but a binary, did you do it or did you not do it, and holding ourselves to account actually can make your strategy a bit pointier. So sometimes it's acceptable to have the odd indicator that you're right, looks like an action, but if we want to lift that up to ensure that it's been delivered, then it can be quite a tactic within your approach.
So I guess the question then is that something that we would look to do later, or are some of these things that could be turned into something that's more pointy?
I think that we can have a look at them, but I think realistically that would be the part. Yeah, it would be something that we would look at, having some sort of more smart type indicators as part of the ongoing monitoring, and that we would develop those further.
And so I think in part why my what's drawn me to this, and I think also relates to what Claire said about the pest part, when there's the strategy on the page, it doesn't draw out the fact that there is that linkage between the actions and then those performance indicators. When you run through the pages in the document itself, like where the goals, you've got goal, and then you can see how they connect. But in here, you can't, because they're sort of just sequential. And so I think, I am now rethinking and realizing that, wondering how, in some ways, how useful the strategy on the page is in terms of it being incorporated into the document itself. I think it's really useful for us to get our eyes on what's sitting here, but as a piece in itself, it potentially draws away from what's actually the really important thing, which is the goal, the actions, and that linkage between them. So just a thought there.
I think that's a really good thought, and that's exactly the same as what we are thinking. This has exactly been the focus of the work we've done yesterday and with design, because realistically, this is going to be the layout for this is landscape, so it's going to be very difficult to incorporate the strategy on a page in a way that's readable into the document. So we actually think that what the option that we're looking at is just present the vision and the goals at the front of the document that would replace this. This could be a standalone strategy on a page so that people can just have a one-pager, but for it to sit within the document itself, now that we've got to see the whole way it's laid out, I think that those further pages where we really describe the linkages between them is a better focus. So yeah, we're working with design on that, but that's actually where we've got to as well. And I think that describes the logic more strongly.
I think, you could easily turn this into a diagram rather than a infographic, like just having, like you said, the vision and goals and, those top 5, and then showing how it links to actions and performance indicators and maybe even monitoring and reporting. Like that could be the diagram and all the details gone from it, and you see that later in the document anyway. So that could be one way that it's done.
Yep.
We also did use this as a mechanism to make it easier for councillors to engage on, the meat on the bones, and then without the narrative and also the fully laid out document. So it was really also a mechanism for staff to be able to actually get more direct feedback on the guts, and then we can work at making it pretty. So, but I take your point in terms of the what should be. Should we go the one page standalone? What should be on it? Thank you.
Great. Oh, you got another one, Vicky?
I did have one more, which was about the funding and whether at some point is there an intention to, because the actions read as sort of essentially collecting up how much are we putting to the cost of, or putting to how much are we going to spend in the budgets, like the annual plans, long-term plan on biodiversity. But what I'm not seeing, and I realised it would be complicated because you've got all the different partners and also individual landowners and all those things. It's complicated, but it would be really helpful, I think, to get a sense of what's the true costs that needs, how much needs to be spent over the short, mid, long term in order to actually deliver the outcomes that we want, rather than going, here's the budget we're putting, and then going, oh, hang on a minute, it was a total mismatch here between where we're getting to. Oh, and it's because we haven't really thought about how much do we need to spend. We just sort of always, how much is left over at the end of all the other things we decide to spend on.
That's work that we are already commencing and thinking about. So looking at both in terms of it's a balance between some of the actions and what's already funded, and having a look at that across all the contributors. But then we'll need to do that work around, to achieve the full, the outcomes that we're seeking. What would that look like? And as you said, what are the different funding mechanisms for that? But that will follow. So we've already started thinking about that, but it won't be in that detail. It's not in the strategy.
Yeah, I've got a grant, and then Ian.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry,
thanks for this. Just really picking up on the conversation for me. I don't mind this on a page. It's kind of like a summary, and when you look at what the document might end up being, where you have that as a bigger sheet, because all the information that's there in the bigger sheet is also in that. But obviously it's something you can think about. But it's like a little reference index sheet before you get into the sort of bigger stuff. In terms of roles and responsibilities, I mean, one thing that I have been doing is looking back to the 2008 document that has been revitalised, but there are some really good parts of that. And one thing that's in there, and it's picking up on the roles, it had a role for Environment Canterbury as being the regional coordinator, so that you've got somebody in this organisation who is liaising with that collaborative approach with the district council people and other agencies as well. So that there is a kind of a dedicated person who is kind of almost administering to make sure that these things are happening in terms of
that's sort of included in section 10.1 with the regional forum.
Yeah, so the forum stuff takes place as well. So that's really, I think that's going to be really important, that we make sure that this is just not going to land, and but if it's 10.1, that's fine. And I think probably one of the really good things is that statement on the implementation plan, which you've said will be a live document, because I think if we can land it on the 17th and then we get some feedback from the stakeholders and the TAs, it can be changed and stuff as a living document as we progress, and also as we develop the funding mechanism and the implementation process. Because I know the Department of Conservation's 5-year plan was all about us all coming together to make the best for biodiversity, and it may well be that in the funding stuff that is shared funding, which going forward is probably the best way to go. What are the ways and mechanisms? So that will come out later on. I did just think of Claire's comment about, seeing, there's a big mana whenua statement at the beginning, and then there isn't a lot about others, our broader community, who have been improving biodiversity through all sorts of mechanisms over the last 20 years or so, even longer. But so it's bringing that together. The work that we do with, have been doing with our Canterbury water management strategy, for example, and all sorts of other things too. It's actually gaining, the pace of change is actually taking place. The conversations within Waimakariri, I know, in terms of Peter's comment, it is that they've increased and lifted their game. They've now got 2 or 3 people in the biodiversity space. So it's really encouraging, and I think that this does it as well. And of course, the reference, Craig, to the RPS is really important too. So it's just those references to what's being done, what's being done by our farming sector, etc., all those sorts of things, and land care groups, MFE. So there's a whole coordinated approach with a whole lot of people. But so it might be that it's a page of something after the mana whenua partnership stuff. So it's a stakeholder awareness.
Thanks, Grant. Claire, I think you're next, and I'll go back to Ian.
Yeah, I just go back to the funding point, and Vicky just raised it as well, but I wouldn't want to see any dollar figures put in here, because I think that, you need to be thinking about it. We can't look at this in isolation. We have the water and land team in here as well, and currently the amount of funding in there is very small, but a lot of the work and the programs around that deliver on this as well. So it goes back to this strategy doesn't stand in isolation. It does combine with a whole lot of some of our core functions and other work we do. So just thinking about how you present that if you're going to extend it in the actual strategy itself.
Just to note, I've just been looking through the MPSIB, and in Appendix 5, it sets out the things that you must include. I think this needs to be looked at as the link to the national priorities. I know we mentioned the national Te Mano Te Taio strategy, so that's good, but just need to make sure that's more explicit. It also mentions that how the actions are to be resourced. Like, that doesn't go directly to having to name numbers in it, but I think it needs to explain how we're going to resource it. And it could be as simple as we will look at those things through long-term and annual plans. I think it needs some statements in there about that, as well as working collaboratively with others and getting other resources in central government and industry, etc. So I just think we should think about that. It also uses the words milestones versus performance measures or something. So I just think it probably needs to be reflected on, if just to mesh the language together. There are some key things I picked up from the Appendix 5 in the MPSIB. The other one is, I think it will probably be very useful, going back to the comment before about the TA and our shared responsibilities. The MPSIB almost sets out what's explicitly a local authority's job to do, for example, SNAs and district plans, including that. And then ours is assessing vegetation cover, the regional biodiversity strategies and monitoring. And then there's a whole bunch of shared stuff. So a diagram that just sort of did that would be really useful, I think. And again, just amplifies that it's not just all on us. It's actually a shared responsibility under the MPSIB between local authorities, both regional and districts. So just think that would be useful. Thank you. Ian.
Well, I just wanted to make the point. Vicky was talking about funding of biodiversity. It's not. I think it's important to remember it's not the quantum of money that we're putting into biodiversity. That doesn't solve any issues. It's the efficiency with which we use that money, and so we need to consider that. We know that if you put money into QE2 Trust or the Banks Conservation Trust or even our catchment groups, that $1 of ratepayers' money might buy $2 worth of output. If we administer that fund ourselves, which we seem to be inclined to do, might only buy 50 cents or even less worth of output. So we need to think about that.
Cool.
I think that point actually leads. I mean, that will be leads quite nicely into the next briefing in terms of exactly what does that look like going forward, and what are the efficiencies in terms of getting the best value for money out of this. Addressing the point around the MPSIB requirements, we've got a really detailed table, which is the work that the policy team have done.
Cool.
So we are thinking about whether we attach that to the final council report or give visibility of that, so that as a council you've got absolute assurance that that's all being covered off.
Thank you. And it could be an appendix as well.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, going back to what Grant said, and it relates to what Claire said earlier, maybe you could have an appendix of all the contributors as well at this stage, knowing that there might be others that want to join in over time, but just to acknowledge that these are the people that have helped us to get this far. So that might be a way to do it as well, just to amplify that. Any other questions or feedback, team? Yeah, Claire?
Just a question. I noticed in the draft you've taken out, you've got it crossed out at the moment, the Kiwi 2 areas. Is there a reason for that? What's the reason for that? Is it inaccuracy? I think it's about page 50. It's towards the end.
It's in one of the appendices, eh?
Yes,
I noticed that.
It's right at the end, and I'm thinking, why have they taken out the Kiwi 2 stuff? Yeah. I mean, that's really important.
There was there's threatened species stuff, there's Kiwi2 stuff. Yeah, it all looked like pretty useful information, but it's at the moment it's got a line through it. That might just be an editing thing, but yeah.
Yeah, again, specifically on that, we're looking at drawing that into the section, I think, where it's either the opportunities or challenges, or, so that will be incorporated into that. So with that appendix, there's a lot of detail in that, but we will bring some of those really key metrics, including the information around the QE2 covenanting, into the body of the strategy. Yep, so that's very consistent with where we're heading as well.
Thank you. Cool. I think that looks like it's it. And I know it's good that we've finished just a bit early and we can move on to the monitoring one. So thanks, team. Good feedback from councillors, and I know there's a lot of work to do, but let's keep going and look forward to the 17th when it comes
great.
back to us.
Thank you for that. That's been really helpful.
And there is a process at the moment, I don't know if we said it, but of going back to all the contributors right now.
Yes.
And we will receive feedback, and that can help inform our decision on the 17th as well. So thank you. So next up, before lunch, we have is it Tim and Judith coming to talk to us about online reporting for biodiversity delivery. Thanks, team. We'll hand over to you, Tim.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Chair. So this is, as Amy introduced, the strategy is looking forward. This is talking about the work that has been done and how we report on this. So this is about the biodiversity projects that we're involved in the report, the way that we will be reporting it, but it's also covering how we have reported in the past and looking to the new ways that we're thinking of, that we're wanting to report on it. So, you know Carl, and I believe you know Sean as well. Sean's the team leader for regional biodiversity and biosecurity, and Carl is the section manager for biosecurity and biodiversity and biosecurity. And I'll hand straight on to Carl.
Kia ora, and thank you for having us for this opportunity to brief you on our biodiversity reporting journey, showing how we've evolved since 2016, including, so we're going to be including an overview of this year's web-based biodiversity report. I just want to point out that we are using the term report a little bit loosely, so there's no official report as such this year, just transparent, easy to source information shared on our website outlining what has been delivered. It's worth pointing out that the provision of this information is not mandated, like the Biosecurity Operational Plan reports, and the primary purpose of this reporting is to keep the community informed about what we're delivering in the biodiversity space. Every year we've adapted and evolved our reporting with the community in mind. We think you'll like some of this year's changes, and at the end of this presentation we'd love to hear any ideas you have for our future reporting opportunities. And I'll hand over to Sean.
Thanks, Carl. Today's presentation will start with where and how we used to report and highlight changes made since the 2016-2017 financial year before looking through changes made last year through to this year. We'll follow that up with a look at the live website and a short demonstration about with the new interactive map. And at the end, followed by a discussion about where to next and what you'd like to see. So reporting from 2016-2017, as you can see up there, were generally short 2 to 3 to 4 page reports covering our key work programs at the time, such as the Fish Habitat Program, Wainana Lagoon, Bradley River flagship programs. It was effectively reporting on activities that would meet outcomes in the CWMS, but were generally by sort of a single team or a single cost code team thing. So they were generally hard copy reports that weren't generally available online. Mostly they were prepared for the CWMS Regional Committee and that weren't usually available on the website. From the 2018-2019 financial year, we prepared the first biodiversity projects snapshot report, which highlighted our key projects in our focus areas, Bradley Rivers, wetlands, fish habitat, working with the community, biodiversity on ECAN land. We reported projects that were sort of closed in that financial year, what type of project it was, what zone they were in, combined ECAN funding from other sources, and we also looked at sort of project metrics, measurements such as length of fencing, how many plants were in the ground, hectares of weed and pest control. And again, it was a narrow focus, mainly around the biodiversity team and single cost codes. This continued through from FY19 through to the 2022-23 financial year, with the reporting adding more and more across the business, including able to include more detail on those focus areas. But as we started to include more across the organisation, such as the rivers section, science, parks and forests partnership programs. And as a progression in FY19, that report was sort of 4 pages, and it worked its way up to about 19 pages by FY23. Last year, FY24, we moved to online platform, predominantly online. We had a small hard copy report which highlighted some of the key projects in the top right hand corner there, but everything was online. And again, that covered our focus areas with a page for each: wetlands, Bradley Rivers, terrestrial work, freshwater habitats, biodiversity on our land, community partnerships, and biodiversity project effectiveness program. Each of those pages highlighted key projects in a view where the reader can open and close to find further detail, photos on individual projects. Going forward, that report will be archived on the website, like the previous reports are, so that they remain available to the public. So for this year, I'm just going to run you through the live web page and the interactive map. Hoping the technology works. Oh, look at that. So, I'll take the glasses off. This is our... Right. This is our landing page there under our biodiversity work. And I'll let you have a wee read there. So we've got 9 panels which cover our focus areas. We have a yearly summary where the map is embedded, but I'll wait to the end to show that. Each of the focus areas there, Braidwood River projects, wetlands, freshwater marine, terrestrial, community and partnership projects, biodiversity on our land, project effectiveness program, and the Christchurch biodiversity targeted rate program. Each of those has specific information. And so I will go into a couple of those areas. I won't go into all of them, just to highlight some of our key projects. So under our Braidwood River project, some of the key projects here are listed down here, and again you can open and close as necessary. They're all multi-year projects. Many of them have multiple partners such as DOC and LINZ, river care groups and landowners, for example. Well, for example, the Upper Aho. Again, each of these hopefully has a photo indicating maybe before and after, or what happened in that particular year. One of our major focus areas is, of course, the wetlands projects as well. Some of the key projects here, they are all multi-year projects, all involve multiple partners, particularly the landowners, and for example, one of our long-term projects in the Lees Valley, where a lot of work has been placed. It's a bit sluggish, isn't it? One of our major terrestrial projects is the Rakaya Gorge work. That's into its 4th year of an estimated 10-year work program. It's already seen good results, with half the area having had one full sweep of weed control, and photo points showing native vegetation coming through in areas that have been previously controlled. Our community partnerships page, once I get there. I should point out that there's a little bit of detail on each of these pages with each of the projects, but where there's been another article or media released about that particular project, that it links off to that where there might be more detail. For example, the Y Fund, short description about what's happened in this past year, but a link off to another part of the web page that has more detail. Our biodiversity and biosecurity partnerships, again, we've got some detail here about some of our national and regional programs in biosecurity, wallabies and wild and conifer, and again they link off to other pages with further detail. One area you probably haven't heard too much about, or we haven't talked too much about, is our project effectiveness program, and this is where we go back to previously completed projects about 3 to 4 years after they've been completed, and do an assessment to make sure that they're on track to being successful, and understand why they have or they have not. So we're into year 7, 8 now, should I say, of this program, where we probably look at maybe between 15 to 20 projects per year. And lastly, before I head off to the map, I'll show you we've got a new panel for the targeted rate, the biodiversity targeted rate in Christchurch. You've received a briefing a couple of weeks ago and a workshop, the briefing about year 1 update and a workshop looking forward. So all of that information that you would have received is on there, including the map, which is really handy, which you've all seen. So I'll just navigate back to the front page.
Our front page gives a yearly summary about this online platform and now contains an interactive map. We've worked closely with our comms and engagement teams, and GIS teams to create a format that will increase the chances of people visiting the webpage and being able to read up on the work that we are doing. The map currently shows a range of biodiversity projects that have been implemented in the FY25 year and cover projects that have a direct impact on biodiversity outcomes, and those projects undertaken across the organisation that have maybe an indirect benefit or a co-benefit to biodiversity outcomes. Each of the projects should have a pop-up window. Let me zoom in. See if the system works. The anticipation, isn't it? There we go. Oh, lost it. So at the moment, there's just a small amount of information for a particular project, the project name, the amount of Environment Canterbury funding allocated, the type of project, and a brief description. So we note that this is incomplete. The intention going forward is that the information contained within the map and in the pop-up box is expanded to include details such as partners involved, funding from other sources and kind, actions undertaken, measured in hectares of weed control, for example. We also intend, this is a narrower view of the work done in the biodiversity space because it doesn't include such programs as the SCAR program, the Y Fund, the Zone Committee Action Plan funding as well. The intention is to include that going forward and also retrospectively. We are able to embed photos in here as well. And I do have an example. Fingers crossed this works. There you go.
It's really good.
Yeah, I've noted that the information, the map doesn't contain information from other programs, so we have more work to do in this space. For this financial year, some of the key stats for the projects: $1.6 million expenditure for our 39 biodiversity priority projects that had approximately $1 million of expenditure or in-kind support from project partners. There was a near $1 million for the targeted rate, which covered 22 projects with an estimated $250,000 of in-kind support. And I guess looking forward, we intend to, like I say, add future years of projects and previous years and to be able to toggle in between that to give a complete picture of our biodiversity reporting.
Cool. Done. Thank you so much. Look, first of all, I just really want to acknowledge the really amazing work that you've done bringing this all together and showing the real breadth of work that we're doing. I think that's something that we've all been we knew that it existed, we just haven't been able to see it in one place. So well done, massive work there. I'll go to questions and then or comments, and then we'll come back after that. Claire, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Look, that mapping is fantastic, and it's going to answer a lot of questions from ratepayers. Just the dollar fund there is very specific for that year, I've gathered as you've just gone on. How quickly do you think you're going to be able to get the previous information in? Because a lot of the projects are ongoing, aren't they? Or have been, they will run more than 1 year.
It shouldn't take too long. We have all that information there within a database. It's just a matter of either automating it or being manual and getting that online.
Thanks, Claire. Dion? Did you have a question? Oh, yeah.
Oh, no question.
We both thought you did, so anyway.
No question. Just I commented about the map, about with targeted rate last time, but being able to see, just showing us that live presentation, because Vicky and I are both were geeks going through it while you're doing it as well. And just it makes it so much easier, and you can just if people ask you questions about biodiversity funding and where it is and what's going on, it's so easy to report back to that now. So thank you for that. It just makes it so easy. But we did find on that map though, both ours. That's live now, is it? Oh, okay. Maybe it's just Vicky and I. Vicky and I just couldn't work it that last bit. So we probably need a 101. Kia ora.
Who else? Anyone? Yeah, Genevieve?
I just want to say how exciting it is. I love this sort of thing. But I'm just wondering, will it have layers to it at any stage, sort of interacting with other parts of our work, or, showing catchments, and maybe it might identify some of the areas that could need some interesting work or an ability for people to think outside the square and go, actually, next time around, I'm going to try for this and see if we can do something in this space. Will it sort of have that layer to it, maybe? Along with Canterbury Maps sort of thing, that sort of work.
I guess we can add any layer we need to be able to get the right information. If we have a layer showing where we've done work and you put that next to an area where we think we need to do work, yeah.
Because just looking at it, I'm thinking, oh gosh, where are those coastal things? I mean, I know it's my word for the year or 3 years, coastal. The seagrassy stuff and the kelp work going on with some people. There's initiatives to be had, I guess, and it'd be cool to see that. But I can see a lot of it now. Yeah, it's been cool.
Thanks, Genevieve. Like I know that there's obviously these are only the Environment Canterbury funded ones. I know for the Selwyn Waihora zone, and through the work of the Waihora co-governance, there is a whole other map that's been produced more recently that shows the. Yeah, Tim, do you want to?
Yeah, kia ora, Craig. I was going to make exactly the same point, and so that's a map that includes all of the people doing work on the ground. And the great thing about this is it's really easy then to just sort of pull in the Environment Canterbury part, but that map, it includes Te Ara Kakariki and all of the different people who are doing things on the ground. And I guess that also, getting to your point, Genevieve, it allows other people when they're, like the Healthy Harbours and things, to pull this information to go with other partners and things like this. So we're not necessarily putting that there on this map, but other people can use our data easily to add.
I just guess on that, how would somebody approach to be added to that if they're doing some exceptional work, to be incorporated into, to see strategically what it looks like, if it's not necessarily on any map? I don't know. Can it be inputted without having had funding?
That's sort of what we've done in the Selwyn Waihora space, because that forum has been active for 10 plus years. So everyone's got together and we've worked with them to bring that data together. It is something that maybe could be contemplated in the future, now that we have the sort of way to do it, that you could do it across the region and invite people to share their data, and we host that. But that's a whole nother work program that I think would have to be funded. But it's an important point, because someone's got to do it. And I think it does relate back a little bit to the regional biodiversity strategy and monitoring and how we do that most effectively. So yeah, I think it's something for the future, to be honest. But the other way is that if they got funded, then they'd, so applying for funding and then getting funding in the future, then they would begin maps. So that's another avenue to put out there. And there's no guarantee about that, but it's another avenue that people should be exploring. But yeah, there is no answer to it at the moment, because no one sort of authority has the responsibility for it. But it's potentially possible. I just who to have? If I can just speak now, then I'll go to you, Vicky. I think that one thing I'm really interested in doing is, and I think, like I said at the start, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I'm really interested in how it links back to our previous discussion on the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy and some of the data and metrics that we currently have in there. and what we're saying about reporting. Obviously, I know there's also the actual monitoring under the MPSIB, so that's sort of listed on page 35, 36 of our thing, and that includes things like broad scale state of Indigenous biodiversity, Indigenous vegetation cover, highly mobile fauna habitat, blah, 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 all those things. I mean, over time, I think this is project-based, awesome, but how does it link to that? And that might be a whole nother area to explore. But I think something that could be really useful on this yearly review page, and this is really helpful for us as councillors, just this is why I'm bringing it up, is because like some metrics where we bring the data together, and in the current document at Appendix 13, it's got the Regional Council's internal delivery metrics. And so there are things like projects completed per annum. So again, you could have like some infographics on this page that says number of projects completed this year or funded this year, and even have the dollar amount, like some of those numbers you were reading out, but total it. So in total, the regional council was supporting blah, 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 this many millions of dollars, plus the millions of dollars contributed by the communities themselves. That would be a pretty cool metric. The other ones in here are fencing per annum, pest control by area, weed control by area, and the other one that I think we should put up is the number of plants we've helped put in the ground. And if you had those metrics across this yearly page, that'd be awesome, because then we can just go to that and go talk about it. Rather than having to go through every one of these projects and add it up ourselves, which I know some people might want to do. I'd be quite keen on doing that. But I think that should be something we could do, and just have that yearly metrics, the 5 key measures that we can then talk about every year and compare them every year. So that would be my wish. Thank you. And I think it should be possible, because it looks like all the data's in one place now. We should be able to pull some of that metrics out, and it is listed in the back of here at the moment anyway. So thank you. Vicky.
Yes, I had really very similar. I was really thinking more like, that sounds great, the actions, numbers of things, but really back to the last presentation, that having indicators that we develop and then monitor in terms of outcomes, because ultimately that's the most important thing. I don't know if we've got, I know in the there's a Banks Peninsula report that was done by EDS that looked at the areas of regenerating native bush, which of course is a lot of pest fencing and pest management, which I understand is a very efficient and effective way of getting native bush back, rather than planting individual trees. So I would love to see that as well. And I know Banks Peninsula's absolutely smashing that out of the park in terms of nationally and regenerating land areas. So yeah, and to the indicators then, it talks about, and I can't remember now if it's in the strategy or if it was in your briefing, about an annual report. And I'm wondering whether is annual useful, or is a longer time frame to be measured to be reporting outcome more useful in terms of your sort of team time and spending, noting that the CWMS report was indicated to be in the original, it talks about an annual report, but in fact it went to being biennial. And so I'm just there, and it might be that there's like an actions report comes back annually, say, but a monitoring of outcomes might be, which I know is perhaps more complicated to do well, might be more like a biennial, even a triennial, to line up with informing long-term plans, for example. So just some thoughts about that, please.
I think there's a few things in there, and it reflects also the chair's comments of the the strategy once it's in place, and then the implementation of it and the reporting on it. That's future, and we'll certainly be thinking about that, whether it's directly this team or it's done across the organisation. We'll certainly be thinking on that. But just to remind you that there is also the biodiversity monitoring work, and there was a program that was brought, I can't remember when we last talked to you about it, but and that is very much thinking about outcomes, and that again would be reported through, and this is a good framework for it to be done. So that is in mind. This is as we said, is about the project work that's being done, and there is certainly a lot more that we could be doing in terms of reporting in on the targets and things in there. So
these are the ones here on the bottom of that page. That's the longer term biodiversity monitoring stuff that the team brought to us a while back as the way they're doing it. And I think they're the more outcome driven. That would be longer term. You'd need 5-10 years of data to make real sense of it. But this is more output monitoring the way I see it. But yeah, I think really important point.
And certainly we haven't forgotten about that longer term outcome.
So just to the point, sorry, I hadn't clicked that this didn't tie in quite the same way as with the last. I'm very much in the strategy long-term thinking right now. But just in terms of this then, capturing this and this as an output, that capturing online, it looks fantastic. So thank you. The only thing I would say is, having done as Yayan pointed out, going in and trying, I struggled to find it from the start of our web page. So I just make sure that it's really clearly there, because it's something that I think our communities will be really interested in.
Do you want me to answer? Yeah, I can just answer very quickly on that. So there is actually a campaign that will be done to draw people's attention to it, to help find it. So yes, it does need to be findable if you just turn up by mistake, but most people do organic search and it will be taken there, or will be taken from a campaign. So.
Thanks, Steph. Peter, and then Grant.
Yeah, thank you. And Tim, I understand that the kudos you're receiving here is because you're the acting director of operations. So well done to the operations guys. I'd just like to make a comment and then a request of you, Tim, actually, when I get to the end of the comment, so just bear with me. So in 2016-17, when I first came in here in a hybrid-based model in Yayan, and John and Claire were here also, there was a call made by Cynthia Roberts at the time to have a step change in biodiversity. And I think the stuff that you've got here is actually starting to achieve that, because the data and the knowledge that you can get from just, doing your own bit of science around this is really quite productive for people who have a passion for this stuff. And my request for you, Tim, is that when you depart operations and go back to science, that we actually put some thought around how we get that data that we so desperately need around, water quality and those things into an interactive model where people can, people can take advantage of. And you were in Glenavy, and you would see that we could solve a lot of our issues if people could see and interact with stuff. So that would be my request, and I know that it's on everyone's minds how we do this, and that request from the floor about the data from that Federated Farmers Fellow is typical of what we need to do here if we want to make a good step change in understanding our water quality and our nitrates and all those things. And yeah, so well done, acting director. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Grant? Oh,
yeah,
David, you got your hand up. I can see.
Yeah, thanks for this. This looks really good. In fact, it's really exciting to think that you could then progress this to all sorts of things that we've been talking about. The thing that struck me is that this is fine. It gives a broad spectrum of where we're going across Canterbury. And presumably at some point you could actually apply that in a spatial context related to our RPS map in terms of freshwater management units. And you could say, present Waimakariri, this is what's going on. But also, I think, given our previous conversation about the biodiversity strategy, that if we are looking at a collaborative approach to address some of these issues, that you integrate what DOC's doing, what the district councils might be doing, and others. And even though it could be a busy thing, the only way you could really do that successfully would be to break it out maybe into a freshwater management unit that is almost like a subset for people that are the relevance for people who live in these places. Even though you've got, South Canterbury and stuff that really, Kaikoura, people are very, they're very interested in what's going on their local area. So I think that that's really good, and obviously it's the priority biodiversity projects, but there are other stuff going on. I don't know how that's conveyed, but I think the link up between that and the operational team, Tim, in your current role, but we had one presentation from Pim a while ago, which was really, really good, and it was a slideshow showing what's been, some really good information. Is that, gosh, our team is out there, and you can convey that to constituency councillors so that they can be better informed or better inform their communities about what's going on. But I think it's that shared process is the really key to see what's going on in the wider context for all sorts of players.
Thanks, Graham. Got David, you're next, and then Dion.
Thanks. Just looking at your interactive mapping, I presume on a live sort of system, if you clicked on one of those icons, it would pop up, tell you more about it. A bit like in the top of the screen, there's a pop out there talking about the Upper Rakaia weed control. Is that the sort of information that will come out of that map?
Yeah, that's just what we showed before, David.
Yeah. So, looking at the map, there's quite a concentration of activity around Greater Christchurch. Granted, a lot of it is targeted rates, but is there anywhere in this reporting that sort of talks about the overall expenditure of biodiversity projects across the ECAN area, and how interested groups may or may not be able to access funds and how they'd go about
it? Some of that information isn't available yet on there, but it's all potential to be added later on. We really have focused on creating a foundation for growth through this interactive map. The likes of Sean mentioned earlier about some of the other things like SCAR that are currently not on there that will be added on there in time. We've talked, various councillors have talked about all sorts of different layers that could be added onto it that we have the potential to add on in time. The idea would be that as it grows, we'll incorporate the likes of filters so that you can start so it doesn't get too busy, and we'll have a really good source of information that is publicly available for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. There's quite a sparsity of any projects in North Canterbury, according to this map. So I'm probably just playing the devil's advocate and wanting people to be able to look at this sort of information and say, right, well, we've got some good biodiversity projects going around the Mackenzie Basin, for example, but not a lot in North Canterbury. And how do we advance some work in that area, and what are the options available to various groups to be able to look at an application or a proposal to ECAN to initiate some biodiversity projects in areas where it's obviously quite lacking.
If we add the SCAR stuff, as the team said, and the zone committee projects, then you will see a much more regional spread, I think, of projects. And the other thing, I know that this is obviously just this year, but in previous years, the Waio catchment in North Canterbury did get a lot of funding through the Merurako program. But of course, that's not going to be shown on this one because that's from a previous year. But that will be something to also maybe look at in time, is how do you reflect the multiple years of project funding we've done over a decade or something. So that's a whole nother challenge, I know, but that would be good to see over time as well, because then that could answer some of David's questions as well, that we have spent money in different places over time. And of course, everyone's open to be able to apply for the Waitaha Action Fund that's across the region. So, yeah, Vicky?
Well, just to add that also the targeted rate for Christchurch is automatically going to mean there'll be a higher density in that area, because the community has specifically said they want to fund that work and that it's important to them. My colleagues were very welcome to put forward the idea of a wider biodiversity rate for their particular areas, and let's up the biodiversity spending across the region. But for now, that will be a pattern that you will see year on year until others decide it's important to them too.
Dion. And lastly, Grant.
Oh, yeah, just quickly about the man. I mean, it looks like there's not much happening in North Canterbury, but if you applied a topographical map or a map showing areas of outstanding natural landscape, alpine, subalpine, and extensive areas in North Canterbury that are natural areas that don't always need some attention, but I think it's if you put that layer over it. Then these little dots that you've got on here are sort of targeting things that are needing improvement, if you like, revegetation. So yeah, it's all of those factors come into it. So it's just looking at the map. It's not,
And that is another area of sort of metrics in the biodiversity strategy too, the threatened areas and protected areas. Sort of statistics, and so that would be an interesting base layer, wouldn't it, underneath this, of showing all that stuff. But again, more at least we've got the work that we're doing recorded really well. So thank you again, team. And Carl, I'm going to hand to you.
I was just going to state, and I hope that it is quite visible, is that every year we come and we report on how we're going in the biodiversity space, and every year we listen to the feedback that we get from yourselves, and that's a big part of the evolution of this, is the feedback that we get through this forum. So I just wanted to say thank you for that as well.
Cool, thank you. And Taff.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say very quickly at the end that the work that the team has done here to make this happen, what looks like now quite a nice, simple and clean interface. We have reasonably unsophisticated systems behind the scene in terms of our data and bringing all of the sort of financial, the project data, and the mapping and everything together to make this happen, including our web platform. A relatively unsophisticated system. So what looks nice and clean here has actually taken a heck of a lot of work to the team to make this happen.
Yeah, thank you again, team. It's really amazing stuff. So thank you so much. And anyone else got anything to say? No, Cowboy? Oh, you just give Sean the big...
Sorry, I was just acknowledging Sean.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Sean. Well done. Let's have lunch, people. Thanks, everybody. And we'll be back at 1:00 for our next session. Thank you.